Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
After quite some time, India-China border seems to be back in news. And there seems to be quite a bit of khitpit in different regions, in fact, quite far apart, from two extremes of Ladakh, then to the other end on the eastern side in North Sikkim. So, what's going on? Do these things happen just like that? And then there is this sudden Nepali activism over the Lipu Lake Pass. We had spoken about it in an earlier Cut the Clutter in detail. I'm sorry, that day there was a technical issue, so our audio was not very good, and some of you complained about it. But we had talked about this in detail. Now, this has been there for a long time. There have been some claims, but the Nepalese have never pushed the envelope on this. The Chinese have never questioned the Indian ownership of that land. In fact, China and India have been trading officially on that pass, across that pass. So, Nepal has also upped the ante. Is there a thread between all this? So, one thing I can tell you is that in relations between any two nations, very few things happen unless there is a reason behind it. Particularly when it comes to big countries. India and China are big countries. They also know that they are not about to start fighting a war with each other. In fact, both know the stakes in peace are so high that they are not going to disturb that peace until something really uncontrollable happens. Once again, remember that the last time India and China exchanged shots fired in anger was when I was 10 years old in 1967. That was the skirmish at Nathula, which was quite the opposite of the 1962 war because Indian Army gave a very good account of itself. That besides, in 67, for 53 years, the two countries have maintained peace. They've been this little bit of physical pushing and shoving and shouting and screaming and complaints and exchange of notes and protests, but there's never been a shot fired in anger in 53 years. So I don't believe that any country wants to disturb it. Then, if no country wants to disturb it, and there is a line of actual control, both sides patrol it. So how come these skirmishes keep coming up, unarmed skirmishes or fire-free skirmishes, let me say. These happen because both sides have a different perception of the line of actual control. Because this passes through very difficult mountainous or wooded territory. So you say, I think line of control is here. The other one say, I think line of control is here. So you go into an area which the other side claims, and that is when some tension comes in. So both sides over this period have signed many protocols whereby it ensures that this confrontation never goes out of hand. So one side confronts the other with a banner saying you are in our territory, go back. The other side says, no, you are in my territory, go back. Thodi der ke liye that tamasha goes on. After that, one side returns saying, okay, in the interest of peace and tranquility, we are going back. You also go back. And the other side also goes back. Nobody gives up their claim. But usually these are claims over very small areas and basically perception problems. Also because the two sides have not demarcated the line of actual control precisely. Now, when these happen suddenly, occasionally these can happen, they can be settled locally, it never becomes a story. It becomes a story when it becomes persistent. And the record tells you that this is the way the Chinese send a message. That's why you find anytime somebody from the top in China comes to India, you will find an incident like this at the border. When Xi Jinping came to India, Chinese landed up in Chumar, and that went on for some time. So in fact, the entire visit was overshadowed by the tensions in eastern Ladakh at that point. And this is a persistent pattern. That's how the Chinese convey a message. So what message are the Chinese conveying now? No, it's possible the Chinese are telling you, look, we are in bad odor right now globally because of coronavirus, etc. A lot of the world thinks that the virus escaped from China. We didn't share enough with the rest of the world. we did not stop flights out of Wuhan in time, etc., 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 and that we are guilty. The world is trying to blame us or hold us guilty. If you join in with them, you should know that there will be consequences because we are your neighbors. So you have issues with us and you have a vested interest in keeping the peace with us. Otherwise, we can create trouble for you along all these borders. That can be one thing. The other is because Trump is attacking them so strongly now, and the British and the French, even the French, they have spoken out. So the Chinese do feel cornered. So maybe it's also a good way to distract attention. Third, as Tom Friedman said, columnist Tom Friedman, that off the cuff with me 2 weeks back, he said when we talked about what the Chinese are doing around their borders, that is borders with India and also in South China Sea, where again they seem to be saber rattling a bit with Japan and others. And he said that, look, it's a well-known thing that when strong leaders like Xi Jinping get into trouble or face unpopularity or face resentment from their own population, they try to drum up some trouble in the neighborhood to once again rev up the nationalistic feeling, and that might be happening in China. It may be a combination of all this. That's why our army chief was not wrong when he said that the sharp Nepalese reaction to Lipu Lake looked like it was on another country's behalf. It most certainly was on another country's behalf, and the country is China. Whether the army chief should have said it, or maybe some joint secretary in the MEA should have said it, or maybe somebody should have said it on background basis without being quoted, that's a different point, because Indian Army Chief has a sensitive position and a very important position in Nepal also. He is also the honorary chief of Nepalese army. This is just an honorary arrangement that the two countries have, because the two countries have a very strong special relationship. So the Nepalese, surely this Nepalese government is acting and upping the ante on China's behalf. Whether it will serve their purpose or not, if you ask me, I think they will end up harming Nepal's interests, because it's not in Nepal's interest to become any country's client state in this situation. Nepal should not get tempted by looking at Pakistan, that Pakistan is benefiting so much with its special relationship with China and is helping China triangulate India. So we can do it on the east. Nepal and India have too much shared between them. But the language that the Nepalese leadership has used, KP Sharma Oli has used, is really bad and objectionable. He said he's called coronavirus the India virus coming in from India. He said this is a much more difficult virus than the one that came from China and Italy, etc. The whole world knows that the virus has only one strain. It may mutate every week, but the strain doesn't change. Virus is the same. There is no such thing as a stronger virus and a weaker virus. That WHO has said again and again. This is a nonsensical statement. And then to say that no matter what happens, whatever it takes, we'll take this territory back from India, it will never happen. They will never, and they haven't talked about this for so many decades. Suddenly to ratchet it up like this, I think he's positioning Nepal in a place where his successors will struggle to pull it back. Don't blame it on the fact that he's a Maoist. He is a Maoist, but everybody in Nepal, in the Nepalese government, is a Maoist. So, and the good thing about Maoists always is they never agree with each other. Particularly when they are in a democratic setup, because Nepal also has a kind of democracy. So he's there, but there are other Maoists like Prachanda who may not be in full agreement with this. But the fact is that once you ratchet up nationalism and what is called as irredentism, which means a nostalgia for getting back territories which you believe that you might have had rights to traditionally or in the past, it doesn't help any country. And it's not going to help Nepal. And he's raised other issues. It's quite clear that he would not do it on his own, whatever his own ego hassles with this Indian government. He's doing it because he thinks at this point the Chinese want him to do it, and it's quite likely that the Chinese have put him up to do it. So once again, when you tie these 4 or 5 things, you know that this is a message being sent to India by China. It's also a message to the rest of the world being sent by China through this activity. Now, I know that there is a lot of curiosity about where this place is, what is happening. So I will just tell you in 2 minutes. Look at the map of this part of India, the Ladakh region. It's a very long frontier with China. And in that frontier, if you look at the troubled areas are quite far apart. So when you see these pictures of the scuffles or boats chasing each other in Pangong Lake, they are around Pangong Lake, which is to the east of Ladakh. The Galwan area, where the earlier scuffle took place and where the Chinese came and tried to stop India from constructing a little culvert over in Nala as part of a new road building activity, that's in Galwan, along Galwan River, which is more than 200 kilometers to the northwest of the Pangong region, right at the foot of a high point called Daulat Beg Oldi, DBO. That is the furthest point, and I'd say the northernmost point on Indian borders besides Siachen. That's where India has its famous airfield, which is probably the highest or among the highest airfields in the world. In fact, India just landed a C-130 there, Indian Air Force, some time back. That airfield has been upgraded. The DBO lies at the foot of the Karakoram Pass. And this is a very exotic region also. So why is DBO or Daulat Beg Oldi called Daulat Beg Oldi? Because it seems that in 1533, I'm taking you that far back, when Humayun was in his first reign in India, 1530 to 1540. In 1533, a Khan from Yarkand came in to conquer parts of Kashmir and Ladakh from this area. When he was going back, he died because he had fallen sick on the way in because of high altitude sickness. On the way back, he again fell sick because of high altitude sickness and died. His name was Sultan Sayyid Khan. He was from Yarkand. So, because he was a big, rich, powerful guy, he was in local language called Daulat Beg. That means big, rich guy. Daulat Beg Oldi, where this big, rich, powerful guy died. Oldi, I'm not sure, but must be some kind of a derivative from Balti language. So that's how this place acquired its name, going back to early 16th century. Then you come down from there, you see Galwan River. What is Galwan River? It's an 80-kilometer small river, a mountain river, very rapid. It comes and joins Shyok River, which is a tributary of the Indus. So Galwan is also essentially a tributary, upstream tributary of the Indus River. This river, Galwan, and the valley is named after, again, a gentleman called Ghulam Rasool Galwan, Ghulam Rasool Galwan, who was a Ladakhi explorer who came with the British exploratory mission to this region in 1899. Until then, nobody had discovered this region. So they discovered this valley, and because he discovered this valley was, and the river was named after him. So he was Ghulam Rasool Galwan. So that's why the Galwan River and Galwan Rally. 1962 also this place had seen a fairly sharp battle. That's when Nehru, Krishna Menon and B.N. Malik, then IB chief, they had followed what was called as forward policy. So they were setting up Indian posts, going ahead, setting up isolated Indian posts. So one Indian post was set up in Galwan Valley as well. 68 soldiers of Jat regiment were there, led by a Major Shrikant Hasabnis, and that post was run over. So of the 68, 36 were killed, 32 were taken prisoner, including Major Hasabnis. He later came back, he returned from the POW camp and rose to be Lieutenant Colonel and retired. Then you come 200 kilometers the other side towards the east, towards south and the east, and you come to Pangong Tso or Pangong Lake. Pangong is in Ladakhi language like a depression in the land. Tso is Tibetan for lake. So Pangong Tso is a landlocked lake with beautiful cold water, but brackish water, so you can't drink it. That's the lake where you saw Amir Khan in that film, Three Idiots. Now, Pangong is a lake which is divided between India and China. So roughly 60%, a little over 60% of the lake is with China, a little over 35% of the lake is in India. So if the length of the lake is about 134 kilometers, say about 45 kilometers, you will see it on the map, is with India. And the line of control passes through the lake. The rest is with China, and you can see how the lake goes. It becomes thinner. At its widest, the lake is 5 to 6 kilometers. It freezes during the winter. You can drive vehicles on it. You can play polo with horses on. So when you see the lake, you can see that it is landlocked. The southern bank and the northern bank, where the dividing line is, India has the territory on both sides of the lake. Now, on the northern side, on the south, there is no issue. On the northern side, where India's territory ends and the Chinese controlled territory begins, there is a dispute. That dispute is an area which is called the finger region. Finger region because there are spurs from the mountains going into the lake, and then they look like the knuckles of your hand. This is only 4, so make it 8. So if we had these 8 knuckles, these are the 8 fingers going into the lake. India thinks that India's territory is up to finger 8. China thinks that India's territory is only up to finger 2. So when Indian patrols go beyond finger 2, the Chinese come and tell them, boss, हमारे इलाके में आ गए, go back. थोड़ा तू मैं के बाद they go back. When the Chinese come this side of the 8th, from the Indian side, then Indian patrols tell them, look, you've come too far, go back. Then they go back, and this goes on. The same thing goes on in the lake also. So what happens, depending on whether your border ends at finger 2 or finger 8, you have this much of lake with you or this much of lake not with you. So because both sides fight or argue, when the Chinese come in here, Indian boats go there, tell them to go away. When Indians go there, Chinese tell them to go away. Sometimes when you don't go away, then you play these games, you run these circles around each other's boats and give them trouble until they go away. So this tamasha, this Nura Kushti goes on. Once again, this is an area which saw a lot of fighting in 1962. India had control over the entire territory on the north, but the Chinese took it. Some of the territory they withdrew from, some others they did not withdraw from because we mentioned these exotic places. Daulat Beg Oldi in 1962 was abandoned by the Indian side because it was seen as indefensible. But since this was not within China's claim line, the Chinese did not come and occupy it. That's the reason India has that territory. So that is the state of play there. But I don't think how the territory is located and what exactly is happening there is going to make much of a difference going ahead. What is behind all this is diplomacy. What's behind all this is strategic positioning. The Chinese are sending India a message. India is also sending China a message back by saying that we are not intimidated. In between, you have a new player, which is Nepal. And for sure at this point, Nepal is behaving. I know my friends in Nepal will be upset for me saying it, but the kind of language Oli has used in Nepal would tell you that Nepal is acting not by itself, but as a client state, unfortunately. And it will not be good for Nepal, it will not be good for India-Nepal relations or the region, because India and China are at the end of the day big boys. I say it in a gender-neutral way. They have to live with each other. They've learned to live with each other and they will sort this out. The Nepalese are getting caught in it, I think, quite unnecessarily.